The more experience I gained with audio products, the more I discovered that pricier products typically mean a smoother and a warmer sound. Somehow people are willing to pay for a smoother and a warmer sound, and today we are going to study one of those products. This is the Dethonray Listening M1. This is a DAC amp, basically a digital to analog converter and a headphone amplifier, priced at $2,599. This is a proper flagship, and we're going to see just how it sounds like and if it's going to be your next music companion. To say the least, this is a pretty ergonomic product, very small actually. It is tiny, it is lightweight, about 500 grams, and it looks very smooth, it looks very sleek, and it has this very futuristic design. The rubber feet on the bottom have been glued by me because it originally doesn't come with any feet, so I would suggest grabbing some of the cheapest rubber feet that you can find at IKEA or Home Depot. Otherwise it may scratch, especially as it stands on those metallic feet. Those may scratch, and you know, when you are paying $2,500 US, you want to keep it pristine. The unit has a very small strip of LEDs at the front which show you the current input. We have an auxiliary input, coaxial input, USB and Bluetooth. We also have a button to cycle through those inputs. We have a gain switch. We have two headphone outputs, one in the 4.4mm balanced format and one in the 3.5mm single-ended format. There is a volume wheel, which is not analogic, although it feels analogic, it is a digital controller, and I'll explain in just a second why. And at the back we have a line out, which is in the RCA format, which can act as a line in as well. So inside of the Listening M1 there are circuits that allows it to switch, because we have an auxiliary input and it uses the RCA line out. We have a coaxial input. We have USB DAC input in Type C and Type A, so you can use it with both newer and older cables. We have three switches, which are going to be very important to the usage of the Listening M1. We have a firmware update port, which I have used because I wanted to try it with other firmwares. We also have a Bluetooth antenna right at the back, and we have a DC input with 24 volts. Speaking of the current, Dethonray ships it with a very simple but effective power converter. So this one is the power converter. There should be some advantage if you are going to purchase a battery or a different audiophile grade power converter, but for my usage the default power converter was quite good already, so there was no need to upgrade it. Starting with the front of the unit, I have to mention that the gain switch is not instantaneous. So when you flip it to high or to low, it will not change the volume unless you are using the volume wheel. The volume wheel also doesn't change the volume quite instantaneously, so when you are using the volume wheel, it takes around half a second for it to register what you've done, which can be slightly odd, especially if you are coming from a DAC amp which has an analogic volume wheel, as an analogic volume wheel would change the sound instantly. At the top we have this very beautiful Dethonray logo, which is in golden, and we also have the two headphone outputs. The balanced headphone output sounds much better, which is to be expected. Usually the balanced headphone output sounds better, but this is because it typically has twice the power, if not twice the power precisely. Usually it has two separate amplifiers, one for the right channel and one for the left channel. It has to be like this. At the back, we also have the coaxial input, which I tested the least because typically I use the USB input out of convenience. As I like to watch videos, to play games, and to use this as the main sound card for my computer, the USB input makes a lot more sense. The Bluetooth antenna is exceptional because this one has LDAC Bluetooth input, and between the USB input and the LDAC input there is a very small difference. It can actually handle Bluetooth inputs quite well. The sound is very detailed. It has a good amount of dynamics, and although I do hear the Bluetooth compression here and there, it isn't very obvious. So you could be using the Listening M1 via Bluetooth without a care. The unit gets warm during usage, so it heats up a bit, but it doesn't get hot to the touch. You can't fry an egg on it. It doesn't reach dangerous temperature. It just gets warm, and it is barely warm considering my environment, but I typically keep below 25 Celsius in my room. So your experience may vary a bit if you have a very warm room. That being said, if you have a very warm room, you may also not be using headphones because heat is not the best friends with headphones, so I expect that whoever uses the Listening M1 will have a cold enough room to use headphones, which means that it won't heat up too much. So the switches at the back include a USB 1 or 2 switch. You typically use USB 2 if you want to connect it to a computer, although USB 1 is useful for consoles and for older computers that don't have the USB 2 protocols. On Windows 11, I didn't need any drivers. It works out of the box. There is no USB DAC delay, which is very important for a USB DAC, especially at this price point, but happily there is none. So you can play first-person shooters, you can play games, you can watch movies. There is not a single frame of delay. So the USB DAC delay can never be zero. It's just impossible to have it set at 0, but it is below 10 milliseconds. You will never notice the USB DAC delay. Technically, the signal takes some time to travel to the DAC to be processed, to be amplified, and to reach your ears. But if it all happens in less than 10 milliseconds, you will never notice this delay between the second that the computer is transmitting the signal and the moment it is reaching your ears. Generally speaking, if you have a monitor with a 60 Hz refresh rate, which is the most standard refresh rate, it takes 16 milliseconds for the signal to reach your monitor and to be displayed. So it is good to know that the sound will reach it before the image. The first switch at the back, so we have those red switches, very mini in size, and the first one is the headphone or the EM selector. It's actually quite important because together with the switch at the front, we have 4 levels of driving power possible. So we have the switch set to EMs or to earphones and the low gain, which offers us a lot of volume control for EMs. You can set it even at maximum, even with some pretty sensitive EMs. This allows us to control the volume very precisely. Then we can set the gain at the front at high, which allows us to go much louder in the volume, but it offers much less volume control. With most EMs, if I have the selector at the back set for EMs and the gain at high, I can't really go above 12 o'clock, so it gets loud quite easily. Then we have the selector at the back set to headphones, and we can set the front gain switch at low, which gives a very good amount of control for most headphones, but not quite enough driving power for headphones like HiFiMan HA1000 Special Edition, which I have right in the back. And we can set the gain to high, situation in which even with the HA1000 Special Edition, I can't really go beyond 2 p.m. o'clock. So this is about the maximum I can go. And this is not a defect of the unit, but the sound just gets too loud for my tastes if I go beyond that. We also have a tuning switch or tuning filter, which allows us to choose between reference and direct. Reference tends to sound a bit more refined. It also tends to sound a bit colder and a bit brighter, more neutral, while direct tends to just send the whole signal as it comes to the DAC and to allow the sound of the DAC to be processed directly. I couldn't notice a very big difference between them. The difference isn't quite that large, but it is a good way to slightly equalize the sound if you want to play a bit with how the listening M1 sounds like. Speaking of the sound, this is an incredibly warm, thick and bassy sounding DAC amp. And I like that about it. It just brings forward the bass, it brings forward the substance and the volume and the body in music. It just gives music such a voluptuous presentation. Everything just has body and presence. All instruments are presented fully. They are presented as an entity which moves air. You can feel the bass in most songs. It gives bass to all headphones and EMs. And that is a good part because with headphones like the HiFiMan HA1000 Special Edition, I use those a lot. So they are like one of my main headphones that I'm using for reviews right now. And with them, I rarely find a source that can properly power their bass because they just aren't very bass heavy. They are quite neutralish in presentation. And the source like the listening M1 can push so much bass into them. They sound punchy, but they don't distort, which is very pleasing. And they just have this really powerful and strong sub-bass extension, which is important because they typically roll off in the bass quite early, as most sources don't have the proper driving power to properly drive them. For EMs, I have noticed no background noise and no hissing, although the DAC does seem to cut the sound entirely when no music is playing. So even if you are pausing the song for just a second, the entire sound seems to be cut. That is not a problem with any sound playing at all. So even if you are playing music extremely quietly, it will play. There is not a problem. And there is no delay between the moment you press play and the moment the sound starts playing. We don't have that problem where the first half of a second or the first second of a song is cut out. That is not present with the listening M1. It just feels like the background noise is so quiet that it feels like the amplifier part is switched off entirely when no sound is playing, which is an interesting effect. You just don't hear anything, no hissing, no background noise, even with Campfire Bonneville or with the Sennheiser EA900. I just can't really notice any kind of noise. The midrange of the Dethonray listening M1 sounds really full, warm and lush. There is a good amount of warmth present in the midrange, and it is a very organic, natural and cohesive presentation. We never have extra harshness or unnatural sounds, and we just have this really smooth texture to the sound. This being said, it has a very good impulse response, so you will hear textures, but they are presented smoothly. You never think to yourself that that texture is harsh or that that texture is fatiguing. Nothing is quite fatiguing with the Dethonray listening M1. We have a good soundstage. It is pretty holographic, both very wide and very deep. The instrument separation is superb. We get a very good instrument separation and definition. You can always, and I mean absolutely always, tell apart the lead guitar, the rhythm guitar, and the voices. The drums almost always are pushed and playing in the background, while the lead guitar and the lead voice typically take the most foreground position. They play very close to you. Then the rhythm guitar and the special effects, usually the keyboards and other special sounds, synthesizers, typically just fill the entire soundscape. It is a very colorful and very vivid presentation that puts you right in the action. You really feel like you are right there when the music is being played. It is really pleasing to hear it that way. I'm typically describing this for rock and metal, although the signature works very well for classical, jazz, acoustic music. It is a very natural and very forward type of sound. It is a very natural and a somewhat laid-back type of sound. It is relaxed, although it stays engaging, detailed, and crisp. The sound is always really, really crisp and really, really detailed. The treble is quite smooth as well, so you can expect a very smooth, relaxed kind of treble. It never brings out shoutiness or harshness or sibilance in music. Instead, it produces that really smooth and refined type of sound. It is always smooth, refined, pleasing to the ear. It just never gets to be fatiguing or harsh. It's the total opposite. It just makes me want to listen more and more, as I'm never fatigued, even if I'm rocking some Infant Annihilator or some really aggressive rock bands. I just never get tired of the Dethonray listening M1 sound. It's always such a pleasure to hear it. Among the headphones that I have right now, there is not a single headphone that the Dethonray listening M1 can't drive, and I mean it can give full body power and punch to Audeze LCD5. It actually sounds a bit more controlled even than some larger devices, for example than Cyrus One Cast. Although Cyrus One Cast has a very powerful headphone amplifier, Dethonray listening M1 has a stronger one, despite the very ergonomic and sleek design. At the end of the day, you may be wondering whether the listening M1 is a good choice for you. You have to look beyond the price. If you are looking for this type of sonic presentation, it is one of the very few devices that provides it. If you are looking for this type of warmer, smoother, organic and just really pleasing sound, you have just the Aoun S17 Pro, which provides it, but Aoun S17 Pro is known for getting quite warm during usage. And I have received feedback from people who purchased the Aoun S17 Pro, and they have told me that it really grows so hot that they just can't use it. So there's a heads up. If you know that you are living in a warmer country, maybe the Dethonray listening M1 is a good alternative. You anyways needed an extra DAC for the Aoun S17 Pro, so you could grab the Aoun S9C, Aoun S17 Pro. It was a much larger stack in size, so you can grab a very similar power with a better resolution and a better detail in the Dethonray listening M1. The listening M1 is pricier, but it provides a bit more control for EMs and for full-sized headphones, a higher maximum driving power, and somehow a better detail revealing ability. It's just a bit better at bringing forward details, all while not revealing the sharper and less pleasing aspects of sound. It isn't really made for a studio, but it could work well in a studio too. And Speaking of which, the RCA output at the back is very clean, it has a very low noise, and is just very natural. It also has a fuller and warmer and smoother sound, so you can have a very similar tuning to what you get on the headphone output for your speakers. The only downside is that the headphone output has quite a bit of extra bass, so the sound is always very voluptuous, very full, and it has just very powerful sub-bass extension, while for the speaker output it will depend much more on the amplifier of the speakers and the speakers themselves if they are capable of reproducing the sub-bass. For example, right here I have the Pylon Audio Diamond 30. This one can produce a really strong bass, but it is a very large tower speaker, and with speakers like KLH Model 5, I'm just not getting quite the same amount of bass regardless of what amplifier I'm using. So although with headphones and DMs, the Dethonray Listening M1 provides a very cohesive and very continuous presentation that you can always find with every single headphone and DM, with speakers you will have to consider what speaker you have and how capable it is of producing the sound you're looking for. Thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are enjoying Audiophile Heaven. I hope you'll consider subscribing to Audiophile Heaven. Also, like this video if you find the content interesting. Thank you so much once again, and I hope we'll see each other really soon. Bye!